Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Family Podcast. My next guest is a former Latvian diplomat with more than 21 years of experience in stakeholder management, negotiation, advocacy, and communication. Inese Podgaiska is the Secretary General of the Association of Nordic Engineers and previously worked in the European Environment Agency. She received the 2019 Women Economic Forum Award as Woman of the Decade in Science Leadership, and was included in the 100 Brilliant Women in AI and Ethics list in 2021. She is a mentor and certified mindful coach and advocates for engineers' role in advancing responsible AI and achieving sustainable development goals. Today we're discussing bringing your whole self to work. So without further ado, let's welcome Inese to Family Podcast. Hello Inese, welcome to Family Podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you here. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. And also thank you for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I think it's very important work you are doing. So I'm very privileged to be invited. Thank you.
I'm very happy that we get to chat because we've connected previously online a couple of months ago, actually. And I found out more about your work. Congratulations also on being nominated for Nordic Women in Tech Awards. That's a great achievement. So congrats again on that pretty cool feat that you've gotten. And after finding out more about your work, I thought we should really discuss because your work on empowering women is super, super inspirational. So let's start by telling us more about your work and your current setup that you are now in.
Yes. So the current setup is very interesting because I am still the Secretary General in the Association of Nordic Engineers. So it's a kind of full-time job. But on the side, I have created in March last year a company which is called BU Mindful Coaching with an idea actually to help women. So why do I want to help women is because I'm myself a woman with some experience and with some struggles that I had both in personal life, but also in a career. And this is why I just said, I want to help. I want to share my experience. And I also want to be a role model showing that many things are possible because there's still a preconception in our society, but also among women themselves, that women cannot have both successful career and fulfilling life. And I think this is really a stereotype. It's a big lie. So I would like to help women really to create this life where they can unfold their potential, have successful career and fulfilling family life, but also having enough time for themselves. So what I do one-to-one individual sessions. I also have been working in partnership with the organization High Five Girls, which goal is to attract young girls choosing the STEM education. So I was developing specific activities for teenage girls to boost self-confidence. And I'm also conducting specific workshops on different themes. So it's very much about perfectionism, actually also self-criticism, doubts, fears, and also imposter syndrome. So this is what I'm doing and trying to help women.
That's fantastic. And, when you said that you think it's possible to have a successful career and a fulfilling life, it really resonated with the aim of this podcast because one of our mottos is to advance women in leadership, but also to build the career and life that you dream of. And the reason why we say dream of is because sometimes we don't know how to get there, or of course, it's a journey. So there are ups and downs, and there are, plans that will change, and there's goals that you will aim towards that will take some time. But at the end of the day, you should be confident that it is possible, right? And we interview role models such as yourself so that we discuss these important topics. Mm-hmm. So if you can elaborate a little bit on kind of the inspiration behind deciding to start a coaching practice on the side? Because sometimes we have situations where we know we could do more with our free time, but deciding to prioritize another side gig, if you may call it like that, over full-time career, it's very difficult for many people. And I know this because people ask me, how do you have a podcast on the side, all the time? And then I talk about the fact that, well, this is my free time then. So it's a decision, right? And sometimes I have periods when I'm very motivated, and sometimes I'm really not motivated, and it is sometimes difficult, right? How do you decide to start such a coaching practice on the side, and what was your motivation?
The first one is related actually already to the first question. It's really wish to help women, because I really see that women still today in 2023 struggle a lot. So this was the motivation number one. The second motivation is actually, it's very interesting, is merging the two different sides of myself, because I always had this drive, ambitions, very much driven by having a good career, but which I kind of fulfilled in a corporate world. But then there was this other side of myself, the innate intuition, spiritual, empathic, believing in something big that we cannot really see, which I used as a hobby, to have this counterbalance in this very demanding corporate world. And then it was not only the fact that they were separated, there was kind of a fight in me, because I was so much afraid of the judgment, what people will think if I suddenly say to them, oh, actually, I can feel things, I can see things. I didn't want to be, stumbled like a crazy one. So there was a fight in between me until I embarked on this coaching education, which really opened my eyes for the fact that I am the way I am. And it's time for me now to be myself. And this is why starting the coaching business on the side was actually really giving these two different sides of me being myself, the whole. But in the same time, it's very interesting. I am quite sure and aware of the fact that I cannot anymore live without the two. So that I have to have this lag in the corporate world, but also, like you said, in my free time. And it's very good. I'm very privileged that I can actually organize my time to free time for what I really want. But still, the vision is, or I dream about it, that at one stage, these two sides, they collide, they fusion.
I'm so happy that you've mentioned a setup that you've created, because I think that when people hear this, they kind of feel a sense of relief. I'm so happy that someone is doing this already and it works. Some of the biggest fear we have about bringing our whole self to work is that you need to separate who you are professionally from who you are personally, because it will not match. So people will have some sort of judgments about what you like to do on your free time, what you like to achieve in your spare time versus how you show your professional side. And there's a point in which you must make a decision, or maybe you can now reflect on whether that point will come for some of our listeners, when it doesn't make sense to lie to yourself that you can separate who you are professionally from who you are personally. Obviously, it doesn't need to be as dramatic, but my point here is that if you feel that you are making a sacrifice to not show your whole self to work because you're fearful of the judgment, there is some sort of advice here that I hear, that at a certain stage in your life, you'll be like sick of it. So here we are sharing with you how we've managed to get to this point of trying to merge the two. And now my next question is, how do you do that? So how did you, Inese, manage to bring your whole self to work, and how does it work in practice?
Yeah, actually in practice, it's for many still a big theory, because when you say bringing your whole to the work, not lying to yourself, but how do you actually achieve that without knowing yourself? So the question is, how do we actually are honest about who we are, what we want, what we bring on the table, and actually without any doubts, without any fears, without actually fitting in somebody's mold, or actually without being triggered by someone's stuff. So how do we do that? And the personal development, personal growth is the key. There's no secret. Yes, it hurts. It's a lonely process. It is frustrating. You are actually really, it's kind of like a sickness where you, despite a lot of people around you or your friends, it's a process you go alone. You are alone with that. But the thing is, when you go through it, you feel really good. It's like a snake that actually really shades off the old skin and you feel transformed, revigorated, and everything is fine. But the thing is, it still for many seems like a theory, because also when we go to work, and if we have this idea that we should bring our whole self to work, our leaders should also understand and see the synergies of personal development with professional development, career progression, work-life balance. They are not separated anymore. Because if we don't see it as a package, if we don't invest, and if we don't give the opportunity for our employees to actually invest in their personal development, then this whole thing about bringing my whole to work will still be concept. It will be wishful thinking, an idea. So what we really need to do is to empower people, encourage them to go the way and step into the journey of personal development. Because, you know, some of my clients say, I think we all need someone to talk on a regular basis just to process our thoughts, you know, just to kind of check in where we are. Because I cannot bring my whole to the work, or I cannot bring my whole to my partnership with my husband, for example, if I don't know myself and if I don't know my emotions, feelings, or needs. So personal development is the key.
And how do we start the journey of personal development if we don't know where to start? Do we follow a course? Do we look for meditation practices to begin with? What is your advice on this?
I think it's very personal choice. Again, I think if we would start to give like a recipe, we will also scare people off. I think it's individual choice to try different things and to really see what works for each other. For example, my initiation was a book that I read many, many years ago. It was Joseph Murphy book about how actually our mind has a power, how our thoughts have a power. For me, that was a really eye-opener. So, oh my God, just by changing my thoughts, I can change my reality. That was really great. Let's do that. And this was a kind of a beginning. And then, of course, because I was always, like I said, feeling there was something else. I was a part of something bigger that nobody could really put the word or say, I saw it, so it's science proof. So I started to attend different workshops, meet with different people. I was always interested in astrology because I think it's amazing how planets have an influence on our lives. And I always believed in that. It doesn't mean that others believe in that, but maybe, and then I attended workshops on healing and stress release. I read many books on different subjects because I think it's so passionate and it's so fascinating. And I think also, maybe I should have been a psychologist and not choosing the career in politics. But I think understanding another person and our mechanisms, it's so interesting. It fascinates me. So yes, the advice would be try different things, talk to people, ask what works for them, try and see and find out what would work for you.
Absolutely. This is a great piece of advice that follows all of our interviews that we've given so far, that there's no perfect recipe. So trying out different things, workshops, reading books that are out of your, let's say, area of professional development, maybe, we just talk about how to have different hobbies outside of work. So it can be as different as it gets, depending on what your interest can be. And if you don't read about it, or if you don't have someone to advise you on what to find, then it will be hard to start, right? And to tell everybody here, when I spoke first with Inese, I also asked her to send me some resources, and she did. So now I also opened my eyes to what Inese is following and what inspired her, because I was personally interested in getting some of her feedback here, and I'm super happy that I did that, because now I also got to know about other authors and leaders that I wouldn't probably get to myself, right? This is an example of what you can do. And I will link some of those resources in the episode as well. Great. I want to move forward to talking a little bit about your career development, because there's plenty of lessons here that we can learn from. You host workshops on assertive communication. And that's interesting to me, because I think that a part of bringing your whole self to work and really stepping into who you are personally in your professional life as well has to do with how you communicate and how you put yourself out there. So what does it mean to host workshops on assertive communication? What do you give and what do you get out of it?
I think for me personally, assertive communication, I think, is the one of the most eloquent, elegant, and respectful way to stand up for your rights, for actually setting your limits and also communicating your needs, but also right to say no. So I think, especially for women, it's very interesting, because, we are raised to be the good girls. We are taught to please others. We're taught to care about actually what the others will think about us. So what the assertive communication provides is actually really good tools that help you to solve conflictual situation, to actually help you to avoid being maybe coerced in something that you don't want to do. It actually helps you to avoid being frustrated or annoyed. And at the same time, it also gives you possibility to gain some self-confidence. But most importantly, which I think for me is also the part why I'm doing it, assertive communication helps you to understand yourself. So during workshops, we really go through, of course, some theory, some understanding in which situation you can use it. We go through different practical things. But I think the most important thing, which really gives me a lot of energy, is that to see how women start to engage and share their own experiences, going through and understanding that there are others who've been in this situation. So this feeling I'm not alone with that, feeling of belonging to the group, creating a good atmosphere, the exchange of energy, and actually learning something together with others. And yeah, I think the whole thing about understanding yourself, understanding that you can say things the way they are without offending the others, but being true to yourself. And I think it's really helps to understand yourself. And by the way, Camus also said, to know oneself, one should assert oneself. So assertive communication is very important, because as we know, in all our relationship, communication is the key. We cannot avoid that fact. And actually, the reason why we have dysfunctional relationship, it's because, sorry for my French, but the fucked up relationship.
Absolutely. And when you say that assertive communication is key, can you give us an example of a situation that you change through your workshop, or an example that you showcase in your workshop, so that the listeners understand what's the difference, or what does assertive communication mean in practice?
But for example, I had experienced the situation where I had a colleague who had, and it was a male colleague who was older than me, who had a tendency actually to speak bad behind my back. So what I did is that I actually called him for a meeting, and I said him, saying very clearly, without offending him or whatever, I just said, listen, I'm aware that you are doing that. It's okay you don't like me, but we have to work together because this is how the settings are. And if you don't stop doing that, I don't have anything else to do than to go to my HR and inform them about that. So that was a clear line saying this is no go. And if you cannot change that, there are also the consequences.
Absolutely.
So, and I think this is quite often we are so afraid to take this step because we start going into this spiral. Oh my God, what he's going to be thinking about me. Can I actually do that? What the others will do? What consequences? Is it going to mean that I'm going to be fired? I mean, all these things, we start to actually make kind of an internal monologue about these scenarios that actually might not happen at all, but just our thoughts that start trigger. It's actually our fear that starts or triggers our thoughts, and then we go into the spiral instead of saying, okay, what is the situation? What are my options? How can I say that this is not okay?
Absolutely. I love that you gave this example because it illustrates exactly what does it mean to stand up for yourself, how to communicate your boundaries, and also how to respectfully share that this situation cannot continue. And together we can find a solution. But if you do not want to cooperate to find a solution, there are also things that I need to do for myself in order to be able to work in this environment. And I think this is really key for the listeners, that there's always two sides of the story, and there's always the situation where you also need to be comfortable and feel comfortable. It shouldn't be that everybody should feel super comfortable. It will be discomfort when you bring in this topic, and sometimes there will be some passive aggressiveness, sometimes there will be some consequences to being in this situation, and it will be awkward for a while, but that's okay because you just set a clear boundary that this is a no-go. And similar to that, people can come to you and tell you, hey, I've noticed X and Y, and you will feel uncomfortable, and that's okay because you also would like to have a good relationship, hopefully at work with your colleagues. So if someone takes the time to tell you this, and I'm gonna probably share something that I for sure saw on somebody's page or on Twitter. If someone spends the time to communicate their boundaries, that is a show of love. Exactly. It means that they are trying to tell you how to work with them, how to love them, how to interact with them. Obviously, love maybe is a strong word, but it shows that that person takes the time to tell you, hey, if you want to collaborate, this is how to work with me. And that's a show of love. It's not a show of disrespect.
And I also say, another part of this workshop is that also related to how do you actually receive critics or the feedback, because it's very important, because it's a part of it, because quite often in assertive communication, you deal with conflictual situations. So how do you give it, but also how do you receive it? Because if you go into this auto defense mode, then it's a blockage for this communication. So we need to understand. And then another thing, it's okay to say, I am sorry. We are actually, I don't know why, we are humans. We are not learned to say, I'm sorry, but it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. So it's okay to say, apologize, I screwed it. I'm going to do it better next time.
Absolutely. I love that you're sharing that. Let's talk a little bit more now about your professional life and tell us what are the 3, let's say, most important career lessons that you learned in your development.
Yes, it's very interesting. What I actually learned the fact that people really have an important role. I also think that, for instance, I've been going through the changes in my career life, and what I really learned, don't underestimate the importance of your connections, because they always help, especially when you start a new job. Actually pulling the strings from your connections is very important. They help you to progress you in a new career. So the second one I actually learned is, no matter where you are, no matter what level you have achieved, you really should seek for having a mentor or someone to speak to. Because I think some positions like mine, for instance, in the role of Secretary General, is quite a lonely one. So I cannot just talk with the wall every day. And I cannot consider myself as the most clever that has always the best ideas. I need someone. And then also getting this external perspective, or also actually challenge me sometimes on the things that I take for granted. It's very important. So I would really recommend to have a mentor or a coach or whatever you call this person for, but someone really to talk to. And I think also what is really important is to have a plan. I'm learning myself now to go away from the plan, but I have to say, having a plan always helps. And just actually, sit down and use some time on thinking, okay, what should I do? How should I do? Just to have this reflection. Maybe it's not immediately on the paper you have it, but having a plan, having a strategy always helps.
I love that you say that. Because in all of our interviews, we talk about development, goals, plans, and we often talk about the fact that you can change your mind and you can change your goals, and then you can realize, okay, this doesn't resonate with me anymore, and that's totally fair and fine. But it kind of comes back to the fact that having some sort of strategy is always going to be easier, because you already created a skeleton for yourself on what could potentially happen next. So there's a balance here between having a plan and being flexible, right? And that has to do with what you envision for yourself, but also from a purely planning perspective, what are some of the next steps that you can already consider or take to get to where you want, right? And I'm personally happy that you've mentioned this, because I always make plans. Sometimes I do not keep them, and that's okay. But I think that my mind also works in this way, that I like to make plans and I like to know what could potentially happen and make scenarios. Sometimes they're very, very funny, but at the end of the day, I also get more prepared about what to do in certain situations. And if it doesn't happen as I envision, it's a great learning opportunity, right? So you also learn a lot from having a plan and that failing. Then you also need to be able to adapt. And I find that also quite exciting, I would say, both in my professional and in my personal life. It is something that, really can really make a difference. Let's talk, Inese, a little bit about also your career, because you work in STEM, right? And you are a Secretary General, and you had your own career progression, and obviously you reached this level of leadership that you now have. What did you learn about planning and taking your next career step? Now that we know we both like planning, what did you learn about career progression from your experience?
Oh, what did I learn? Two things, I think. Sometimes things just happen by themselves, like a surprise. They just there, the opportunity comes, and you think, I didn't see it coming. So I think this sometimes kind of wish to get something really stands on my way. And it's been always the case. The things, the best, or all jobs that they just came to me, I always knew what I wanted. This is funny thing. I always was sitting there in my living room and I said, this is the place I want to work. And I always ended up there. Apart from this last one, it was actually my husband who brought the job vacancy because somebody showed it to him. So that, but again, it was brought to me, it's not like that I went. Of course, I never, like we say sometimes, I was not just sitting on my stool, on my chair and making holes there. It means that I've been really doing, searching progressively, but knowing what I wanted, spotting the places I wanted to be. And this is what I actually was kind of lucky to get. So one thing is that wishful thinking, and when things happen, don't push for them. This is for sure what I learned. Then I think what I said previously, it's the relationships. My work is all about stakeholders management, international cooperation, connecting people. So it's all about people. So another lesson that I know, that actually dealing with people is really like an art. So you need to become an artist to make sure that your relations are functioning. So and then again, it goes back again to this personal development, because how do you make sure that they are healthy, your relationship? Because again, you need to know yourself, because we are mirrors. We go, we meet, and we meet the problems that we have ourselves, because we need to work on them. And this I had to learn also sometimes in a difficult way. So I think people really matter, and we need to be really respectful, and we really need to understand it's never anybody else's problem. Yes. I think this is the key that I also learned my hard way. It's not others' responsibility.
Yes, it's called self-responsibility, and others' reactions to your situation is not your problem, but it's also not your responsibility. However, your reaction to situations is your responsibility and your problem, and you shouldn't mirror it or share it with someone else, blaming them, rather saying, okay, what can I do now that I'm in this situation? I love it. And I think, it takes time and experience to figure that out, but once you do, you become also less reactive. You also become more aware of your strengths, and you also become more aware of the fact that bad situations will always happen. So how you react to them is really what makes a difference. And assertive communication, knowing yourself, understanding your weaknesses and strengths can really help navigate these situations easily, and can really make a difference for your well-being, because we're talking about being fulfilled in life. But if you are constantly feeling like at work something is wrong, then how can you separate the two? We just talked about the fact that it shouldn't even be the case. You should be able to have a fulfilling life with your professional setup and with your personal setup. And on that note, I need to ask you, Ines, how do you tackle work-life balance then, considering that you spend a lot of your free time on coaching?
When I started 6 years ago as the Secretary General in the association, one of the board members said to me, you need to put breaks in your calendar. Nobody else will take the responsibility for your well-being. It's your responsibility. And I have to say that I really have been living by this rule since. But of course, I'm also human. And sometimes when the schedule is very tight, there's deadlines, or I do have some dysfunctional relationships, because it also happens, then I can really see that I go off the track. But I am very lucky, because I have a bunch of friends who also provide different treatments. So I immediately schedule, or organize a team around me. And my husband always jokes about me. He said, you are like a VIP athlete with a team of different coaches around you. So this is what I do. I really recognize there's kind of, my body is very interesting, always talks to me. So when I achieve kind of a huge pressure, my body just starts to ache. So, and then I know, okay, it's a signal, that's been too much. And then another thing is, it's true, what I do is that I do plan many different breaks and different things, walks in nature, meditation, yoga, breathing, because it's very, very important for me to have them, because if I actually don't have them, now it becomes like, then I know I will not be managing this level of commitment. So working from home, it's the must for me, especially after meetings with many people or travels. Time alone for me is like breathing air. So I cannot without that anymore. And I can really feel when, I kind of get saturated. And it's not anyone's problem. It's me who gets saturated, because I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm introvert. It's amazing, getting the job in politics and being introvert. So I just recognize very clearly the signals in my body that says time to close, to recharge, so that I can again show up and continue to give. So yeah, breaks in my calendar and time.
That's
for
fantastic.
myself.
I love that you share so many pieces of advice that the listeners can really consider for themselves, because the aim of this interview was really to discuss how we can build a fulfilling life that includes your professional track. And I feel that when you talk about your setup, it feels like you're doing what you are very passionate about. You're working in a position that gives you that fulfillment at work, but you also get the fulfillment of helping others through your coaching practice, which is fantastic, because that's exactly what we want to show people, that these situations exist, and people around us are really happy with their setup and what they've created, and it is possible, right? Mm-hmm. And to sum up, Inese, because you've shared a lot of learnings, now knowing everything that you know and going through so many experiences, including spiritual and personal development experiences, is there anything that you would change knowing what you know now?
No. And I've been really thinking recently also what else I could do or change or make a difference in my life. I actually came to the point to say, wow, how grateful I am for what I have become and what I have achieved and what I have. When we moved from Brussels to Copenhagen 15 years ago, I said to my husband, just promise me, please, when there is an opportunity, we move again out, because I could not feel home in Denmark. For me, it was like, okay, it's just transitory. I'm going to move out from here. Please help me to move out of here. 15 years after, you cannot actually ask me to move out of here, because it's what I kind of built around me. I really made it to my home. I feel it's the best country in the world that exists. But again, my best friend, she always said to me, Inese, remember, your home is where your family is. And it's exactly what Denmark became for me, because also through the integration, which can be very difficult or challenging, but also by creating friends, making new friends, Danish friends, I really made my life starting from scratch. I have to say, 15 years ago, changing from being diplomat, coming here without anything. So I built it from scratch. So this is why today I can say I don't want to change anything. I'm so grateful and happy for what I have.
That's fantastic, Inese. That's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that piece of your life as well with us. I think that this has been a great interview. And to sum it up, I want to go to the final 5 fire questions. And now you're going to share your pieces of advice with us one last time. So let's start with, what is one book you think everyone should read?
It's a book by Edith Eger, The Gift, 12 Lessons to Change Your Life. And why? It's really changed my life, because it's inspired me to get out of my comfort zone and create my company.
Fantastic. What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Be curious. Sounds very simple, but this has been really my drive and my motivation.
Fantastic. Who is your role model?
Nicole Kidman.
I love that.
Yes. And it's very interesting, because it's a combination, of this grace and fragility with the huge strength and talent she has. So she is really amazing woman for me.
Fantastic. What would you choose to do if you were to have another career?
Again, both. There are 2 different things. One, I think I would have liked to be interior designer and a doctor, because it's fascinating to understand the bodies and anatomy of people.
Great. And lastly, if you could change places with someone, who would it be and why?
Ooh.
Maybe Nicole Kidman for a day.
Could be, but I also think, because this spirituality is very important for me. And of course, Dalai Lama, just, even for the split, maybe 5 minutes, to feel the serenity, wisdom, connection with the universe and awareness, just to be in his skin for 10 minutes, but only 10 minutes. I would like to get out.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Inés. This has been a great discussion. I hope you also enjoyed. Thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you. That was really a pleasure. And I really like this atmosphere, a lot of laughter and just, the smooth conversation. It was really a pleasure. Thank you so much again for having me here.
Thank you, Inés. And thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more interviews with inspiring role models.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.